Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. This is Laurie Smith, one child abuse survivor to another restoration, and I'm glad to be here at 6:30 here in the morning, Wednesday morning, September the 7th. And I'm just having a coffee, waking up, and hopefully you're having a good morning so far. This is just really a morning reflection, looking at, taking a look at my healing journey, and hopefully the information will be helpful for you. And just really kind of keeps me accountable, so I'll continue on working through and looking at material that's helpful for me to, and hopefully, like I said, it's helping somebody else out there too. So we'll get right into this and, do a safety checklist, make sure that you're safe enough, really, if you're a survivor of abuse, that you're safe enough to listen to this show or anything like this, so that it doesn't trigger you, cause you to go backwards in your healing journey, which nobody wants. You want to be safe enough to listen, so you're not going to harm yourself or be triggered and just go spiraling downward, backward in your healing journey, and that you might not hurt somebody else too, right? So get that information. If you're not sure where to look, Havoca, H-A-V-O-C-A, Havoca.org has a great section on that, as well as Survivor to Thriver Manual. That's ASCA, Adult Survivors of Child Abuse, a Morris Center program. They have a Survivor to Thriver Manual, and it's the first chapter is Safety First. It's about 60 pages long, and it's got all the information there. It's very important to know this information and make sure that you are safe enough before you listen to anything like this, just to make sure that it doesn't trigger you. And so, we'll get right into this. And we're looking at, it's kind of like a morning reflection here. And, how am I doing this morning? How am I feeling this morning? Feeling pretty good. Just waking up here, but feeling pretty good so far for the morning. Glad that I'm continuing on in my healing journey here. Getting over my cold really helped out, and otherwise emotionally feeling quite well, quite stable, and not doing too bad. And so that's good. Adult survivors. This is an acronym that Avoca has on their website, HAVOCA.org, and it's from Cheryl. And she wrote it in. It's Adult Survivors of Sexual Abuse, and it's an acronym. But she said, this really works for. This information is good for anybody who's been abused. It doesn't have to be child sexual abuse or sexual abuse of any kind. It could just be abuse of any kind. So it's an acronym that she's spelled out. Each letter of Adult Survivors of Sexual Abuse actually spells the first word in a little sort of a writing that she's done just to help people out. So yesterday's was don't let your abuse overcome your chance for happiness. If you let it control your life, then your perpetrators have won. And she no longer has control. You do. And you have the power to overcome your abuse. You have the courage and strength to succeed. So that was yesterday's. This morning's is understand you are not alone in your journey to heal. Adult survivors worldwide stand with you in hand. And counselors, too, are a valuable part of the healing process. Don't be afraid to invest time with them in your life's journey. And they are not judgmental. They are compassionate, caring people. So that's this morning. And, understand you're not alone in your healing journey, right? That's a big thing. I know until I started reaching out to people back, especially in 2009, I really hadn't made very much progress in my healing journey, and I realized that I needed help. And I wasn't going to be able to really do it on my own. I needed to reach out to people. And so as I started reaching out, I realized all these hands came back to me. And as I put my hand out, reaching out to people, all these hands came back to me from all these survivors who had been there and knew where it had been and, what I'd been through and could understand the issues that I was dealing with and the problems that, came about because of the abuse as an adult that I was facing. It was very helpful to get some help and just to know that we're not alone, and we can get help. We have the right to get help. And, whatever help that is, whether it's anonymous help or counselor or therapist, whatever we need, then we have the right to do that and to get that help, right? So they said, they can be a valuable part of the healing process, right? So it is important to reach out, and I'm glad I reached out because until I reached out, nothing really was happening. I wasn't making any progress at all on my healing journey. And so I'm glad that I reached out, and I always encourage people to do the same thing. Even if you don't whatever you choose to, even if you don't have to go really public with your stuff. I just did that for quite a few reasons. But anonymous help. I mean, if you don't trust counselors or therapists, like I didn't trust those types of people, I don't really trust anybody. So I just went anonymous help at first, which was very helpful because I didn't have to give my name or anything like that, and I could just get help, and nobody knew who I was, and it was good to be able to connect with people, who had been through the same things. And so anonymous help can be very helpful as well too for some people. And so it's good just to reach out and get some help. So we'll look at this morning. They have that's from havoca.org, HAVOCA, help for adult victims of child abuse.org. And this next section I want to look at here, this is continuing on with the inner child information for survivors from Havoca. This is inner child learning to love ourselves. And we're picking up with the next part of the article here. And she's written quite a lengthy lot of stuff here about inner child healing. And I'm looking at it because I've done a lot of work in inner healing on with my own situation. And looking at mainly Robert Berney's work, Robert Berney, as well as John Bradshaw, and also a program called Your Envisioned Mind with Beverly Searle out of Australia, and that program really helped me out a lot. Actually, it kind of made all the difference. The other stuff, John Bradshaw's work was very helpful for me to look at. I actually did the work in his books and went through and did the homework, and I found that was very, very helpful, as well as Robert Berney. But the program that actually helped me out to do this inner child healing work was In Your Envisioned Mind with Beverly Searle. And in Australia, it was really, really good. So hopefully, you'll get something out of this too. But I'm interested in looking to see what Havoca has to say about the inner child healing work. And this is the part where she's talking about, or the people are talking about, learning to love ourselves, right? And they said because codependence is a reactive phenomena, it is vital to start being able to detach from our own process in order to have some choice in changing our reactions. So we need to start observing ourselves from the witness perspective instead of from the perspective of the judge. And we all observe ourselves, have a place of watching ourselves as if from outside or perched somewhere inside, observing our own behavior. Because of our childhoods, we learn to judge ourselves from that witness perspective, the critical parent voice. So they said the emotionally dishonest environments we were raised in taught us that it was not okay to feel our emotions, or that only certain emotions were okay. So we had to learn ways to control our emotions in order to survive. So she writes here, we adapted the same tools that were used on us: guilt, shame, and fear, and saw in the role modeling of our parents how they reacted to life from shame and fear. And this is where the critical parent gets born. Its purpose is to try to keep our emotions and behavior under some sort of control so that we can get our survival needs met. And so they say this. So the first boundary that we need to start setting internally is with the wounded, dysfunctionally programmed part of our own mind. And that's really quite interesting. And it's just true. Like I said, I started to look at things in 2009 from that point where I actually started to take a third-party look. I call it a third-party look. So I wasn't looking at it so much from my eyes, but I was looking at the whole entire situation of my life and the abuse that I suffered from a third-party perspective, as somebody else looking into the situation who could see the whole thing through, I guess, let's say if it was recorded, they could actually watch the whole thing, and they're a third-party person, and they would be able to see what actually happened. So that actually helped me out a lot. And I started writing my blog at that time, not so fond memories of growing up in an abusive home. And so that actually became my book, A Life of Death or Redemption, because it's just my blog. I was just writing this blog, like kind of every night after work. I'd come home and just write these blog entries, and I wouldn't bother to edit them or anything. It just flowed kind of naturally. I didn't have to sit and think about what I wanted to write. I just let myself write this blog, and I just let my voice be heard, And it wasn't like the third party person writing the blog. I was writing from my own point of view, from my own woundedness at about 13 years old. And that's where the blog started out, and then I kind of worked forward in it, and I just took that blog and made it into the book, A Life of Death or Redemption. So it is a story, but it's written. It's just the truth, right? That was very helpful to be able to do that and take a third party look and see what happened, and because it helped me to be able to see why I was behaving the way I was, and as an adult why I had so many problems, why I had so many difficulties. and what I needed to do to, to work on things so that as an adult I'm not self-sabotaging or, allowing myself to sort of spiral downward and continue on that path of really just sort of, self-destructive behaviors because I really didn't know anything else. I really didn't know any other way to do life. I could work and hold down jobs and all that and pay my bills and stuff like that, and I wasn't doing any drugs or drinking alcohol or anything like that. I was kind of maintaining quite well as an adult, but my emotional health was no good. So, I'd come home at the end of the day after work and be completely miserable because I'd be stuck with myself, my past, my pain, and everything else. And then the next day would just start all over again. So it was always it's kind of hard to deal with. And then I would quite often spiral down into little pits of depression, because just the whole, really the flashbacks and the aftermath of the mess, really. So I needed to look at it from a third-party point so I could see what I was doing and where I needed help. So that's kind of interesting how they've said that, we need to witness this, we need to start observing ourselves from the witness perspective, somebody looking in on the situation, right? So it says the emotionally dishonest environments we were raised in taught us that it was not okay to feel our emotions or that only certain emotions were okay. And so we had to learn ways to control our emotions in order to survive. That's quite interesting. And that's it's true. I mean, we could do multi-level work as survivors of abuse to see where these emotions became toxic, really, or the sort of the toxification of ourselves, right? Because children are not born that way. It's just our environment, right? So we adapted the same tools that were used on us: guilt, shame, and fear. And we were just role modeling, right? Our parents or whoever the abuser was in the situation. And so this can happen to people. Not everybody would probably relate to this because, many people's abuse situations are different. But for people that grew up in abusive, dysfunctional homes, this is very true. And so they said the critical parent gets born, with its purpose is to keep our emotions and behavior under some sort of control so that we can get our survival needs met. And that's quite interesting. So the first boundary we need to start setting internally is that wounded, dysfunctionally programmed part of our own mind, and that's just it. I've had to do a lot of work just to get in touch with this, with who I became because of the abuse, And as an adult, I thought I was doing all right, But I knew that I had so many problems, and I knew that, if I didn't get help, eventually it was going to be too much, And that's at the age of 42, and I've 41 and a half, really. And I've talked to so many survivors who actually that's about the time when that happened to them too. They were doing fine, sort of thinking they were doing fine until they hit close to 40, and at that point, that's when the abuse that's when all the trauma and the trouble, caused by the abuse, caught up with them, and they had to face it. That's what happened to me, and I think it's just odd that it happens at that point for so many survivors. But I've actually done some looking into it, and there's a lot of people that's happened to, and it's a little bit bizarre, really, that the brain does that sort of thing. But maybe because it's at that point that we're actually able to do something about it, and to actually make sense of it and get some help. So it is important to get some help, and not to do this stuff on your own. Like I know for myself, I did most of the inner work healing by myself, except for the child sexual abuse. I actually had help with that. And I was safe enough to do it on my own, but you have to make sure, if you're a survivor of abuse, to make sure that you are safe enough, to do this work on your own, right? It's very important. So we'll pick up the rest of this, some more of this article tomorrow. And so positive reinforcement, what are we doing right in our daily walk, looking at positives instead of just always looking at the negatives. Like sitting there saying, what I didn't do this and I didn't get that done. And we could do that all day. I could do that all day. But I decided to look at what I'm doing positively as well. And that way I don't get discouraged and want to give up on the whole thing. And I'm just busy this week again trying to get stuff done. I got to, so many things I have to do. I work full time as well, so I got to run all the errands and I do all the cooking and I got to, I'm incredibly busy. So I haven't had a whole lot of time to do any yoga stuff or breathing work or anything like that. So that's all just kind of been pushed off. But oh well, that's all right. We'll just keep working at it. And a positive affirmation yesterday's was I have a new awareness in my life, and this morning's is I acknowledge my needs. I acknowledge my needs. And I could walk around saying that all day. I acknowledge my needs. But am I doing that? That's the thing. Yeah, it's good to acknowledge our needs and to sit down and actually write out. I started writing out what I needed. And I did. That was one of the exercises, actually, of sort of the homework in one of John Bradshaw's books, actually, was to write out what we need, and actually make a list, make sure our needs are being met. And I acknowledge my needs. So that's very important. So that's a good positive affirmation. And self-care, what are we doing really to care for ourselves physically, spiritually, emotionally? What can we work on to help ourselves, right? Physically, that's where I need the most of the work. Spiritually, emotionally, I'm doing pretty good. And I just need to allow that to manifest in my life for my physical health, right? Because my emotional health is getting stronger and stronger and better. My spiritual health is just no problem there, but it's the physical stuff, I sort of let my body kind of go, and I don't care about my body because it wasn't cared for as a child, so I'm like, well, it's damaged goods, so why should I bother caring about it? It doesn't matter to me. That's my attitude towards my body, because of the physical abuse and the child sexual abuse that I suffered as a child. So I feel like, why should I bother? Who cares? It was damaged a long time ago, and horrific things done to it by people that never should have done that. And so why should I care about my body? So I have a hard time with my body. So I'm trying to actually take care of my body and to learn how to take care of my body. And so it's like, it's a big deal for me. So I'm working on that, right? And trying to take care of myself. So that's my big thing. So at least I'm making some efforts there. The Havoca Survivor's Bill of Rights. We have rights, and it's very important to know that we have rights. In the specific to the domain of psychotherapy, you have the right to, and they said here, to be assured that your therapist will refuse to engage in any other relationship with you, business, social, or sexual, for life. And that's right. A therapist should not try to get into any other type of relationship with anybody that they are actually contracted to try to help in any business, social, or sexual relationship, really. And that's important to know. A therapist's job is to do what their job is. That's to help someone with something that they're dealing with, that's caused them trauma or causes them some problems in their life. They're not there to try to set up a business relationship or a social relationship or a sexual relationship with anybody. And so you got to know that you have rights, and that's your right. That you got to watch out for this sort of thing, right? And make sure that someone's not really trying to sort of get into and control your life in any way. We are supposed to be controlling our lives. We're in control. See, I'm no longer being abused, thank God. And when I left my abuser parents behind, and it was the abuse left a huge aftermath. It caused a lot of problems for me in my lifetime. But as an adult, the abuse, I left that behind. And then as an adult, thank God, I make sure that I don't allow anybody to abuse me, so I'm not being re-victimized in that way. And so I'm really, really glad about that. But, I don't need to go to a therapist and then have them start to, sort of weasel their way into trying to get something out of me as well, like as far as a business or social or sexual relationship going, because that's not appropriate, right? But as abuse survivors, many times survivors of abuse don't know where their boundaries are, and they don't know how to set the boundaries, and they don't even know that they have boundaries, that it's okay to say no, right? That's the problem with child abuse, especially child sexual abuse. It was, I wasn't allowed to say no. People could do whatever they wanted to my body, and I wasn't allowed to say no. They just did it anyway. So then as an adult, it's kind of like, well, I guess people can just do whatever they want, whenever they want. No, So as an adult, I put my foot down. I'm like, no, I don't mind saying no, and I say it all the time. No. And it's like, I have rights, and I know where my boundaries are, and it's really important to make sure that you get that information, and that you remember that stuff, You have the right to say no, and you need to know what to say no to. You need to know what your needs are, what you're going to allow in your life. I did a huge lot of boundary work with, especially John Bradshaw's work, boundary work, as well as even Robert Burney has some boundary work. But I'd say John Bradshaw's boundary work was probably the best stuff out there that I've seen to help me out. And I mean, I read the books, like I really read them. I didn't just kind of skip over them and read a sentence and then put the book down and go back 6 months later and try to figure out what I was reading. I mean, I really did the work in those books and really studied them out. They were very, very helpful because I was able to see, wow, this is what I need to do. And this is what I've been doing. This is not at all healthy, and I need to change that, so I don't become re-victimized, right? Very important. And then, it helped me to see my behaviors now I was treating people, right? And I'm still working on that, right? Because nobody's perfect, right? But it's good to make sure that we're not hurting other people too, hurting ourselves, or, we're allowing somebody to hurt us, right? We got to know these things. So it's important to get that information. Personal Bill of Rights, we're looking at number 26. This is Charles H. Whitfield, Healing the Child Within. And you can find that just about anywhere if you type in Charles H. Whitfield, W-H-I-T, Whitfield, W-H-I-T, F-I-E-L-D, just like it sounds, Whitfield. Healing the Child Within. This is kind of everywhere. I saw it on Pinterest, but you can get it all over the web. Number 26, it's okay to be relaxed, playful, and frivolous. And it's okay to be relaxed, playful, and frivolous. And that's something that's kind of hard for a lot of survivors of abuse, I think, to allow ourselves to relax, to be playful, or to be frivolous, right? Because we're always under our own critical parent voice telling us, oh, we shouldn't be relaxed, and why are we relaxed? We shouldn't be relaxed, and why are we playful? We shouldn't be playing. We should be working. It's that adult critical parent voice saying, always getting after us, And as a child, I mean, I wasn't, we missed out on a lot of things as a child, and we missed out on a lot of stuff. So we should allow ourselves as adults to play as well, right? I mean, other adults do that, so why not? Especially if it's healthy play, something we enjoy doing, and something that's not that's not destructive to ourselves. That we should allow ourselves to play. I like working with clay. I don't do it very often, but I really like working with clay, and for some reason that's just works for me. I just pick up a piece of clay and something comes out of it. It's like I don't even have to think about it. Just like whatever it is, an animal shape or whatever, it just comes out. I don't even have to think about it. So it's kind of bizarre. But for me, like I can't paint or draw very well, so I try to sort of avoid that stuff because I'm always discouraged with the leftover the end result. But I like to play. So I mean, I used to buy coloring books as an adult because when I was young, I used to love to color and stuff like that. And because my childhood was just wrecked and ruined, I just decided as an adult that I would go ahead and allow myself to color. And I bought some coloring books and some crayons, and I allowed myself to color. And that was actually it was kind of very therapeutic for me, and it was fun. I enjoyed it. I don't have any children because I was made barren by the sexual abuse, and I didn't adopt or anything like that. So it's different. I think when you have kids around you in your life, they kind of keep you young. But for myself, I don't have any children in my life, so I have to do this stuff myself, and watch my favorite movies, allow myself to have an ice cream, and to do these things, go for a walk in the park, just whatever it is. We could go for a bike ride. I mean, whatever you like doing, that allows you to be playful, right? It's okay to be that way, to be relaxed, playful, and frivolous. We don't have to be hurting and serious all the time. That's where I was back, like 41 and a half years old, had always been doing that, and just, not allowing myself to be relaxed or playful or enjoy life, right? And after my healing journey started, I actually realized, like, wow, what have I been doing? I haven't really been allowing myself to enjoy life, So I thought, that's really ridiculous. I'm just wasting this time and just being a victim of the abuse that I suffered, right? And that's horrific. That's not a good way to be, and I'm working on changing that, right? So that's important. And what else do we want to look at here this morning? Oh, let's see. We're moving on here to, this is Irving Studios. This is a child abuse survivor monument, and that's Michael C. Irving. He's a psychotherapist and a sculptor. He's in Canada. He created this child abuse survivor monument, which is just awesome. It's in Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and it's this big monument where he's taken handprints of people, adult survivors of child abuse, have turned in these handprints, and I turned one in, and he's put these handprints inside this monument that he built, that he created, and it's awesome. It's just, you should take a look at it. It's www.irvingstudios.com, or just type in Irving Studios Child Abuse Survivor Monument, and you can find that information there. But he's got a bunch of information on how to sort of help ourselves as far as coping list goes, adult survivor information, right? He's got a self-care tab there. You can check that out. And the next section I want to look at from his stuff is containment and boundaries, right? Very important. It kind of goes along with what we're talking about with the inner child stuff, and also setting boundaries to make sure that we're not being re-victimized, right? And also to help us in our own, space, emotions, and thoughts and stuff like that. So containment and boundaries. He says here, this is Michael C. Irving, PhD, sculptor, coach, and counselor. Maintaining and managing boundaries is a normal and often spontaneous human activity that survivors of abuse can have difficulty with. So he says boundaries are often your relationship with distance, time, space, emotions, and thoughts. So having conscious boundaries is being able to know and decide when and with whom you merge. It is also being able to determine and vary the degree of limits you establish. And not being able to stand up for yourself, say no, or refuse to give over something you don't want to are all boundary issues. So that is really important. That's where we'll pick up the rest of that, like some more of that tomorrow. But that's really important. Boundary work. I'm glad I did the boundary work, because it allowed me to see that I was doing a lot of stuff I didn't realize that I was doing, because no boundaries. My boundaries were because I was abuse survivor, survived horrific abuse from my parents, actually some siblings, obviously some sibling abuse with incest and child rape and stuff. All the boundaries were broken. I didn't have any clue that I had that I even had boundaries. That, you know what I mean? As an adult, of course I could say no and whatnot, but there were lots of little things that I didn't realize that I was doing that were, not very helpful for me as an adult. The ability to realize that I could stand up for myself in many situations. And certain issues would come up that I could actually stand up for myself, and it's okay to do that. And I have to be careful that I'm not abusive in that, to be too harsh on people when I'm standing up for myself. But we do have a right to stand up for ourselves. We can say no, right? We're allowed to say no, and we're allowed to refuse to give over something that we don't want to, So these are big, big issues for people, boundary issues. If you haven't done any work on it, it's important to actually take a look at some of the information just to see. Until I started looking at the information, I didn't realize what I was doing. And even the self-sabotage information from different places that I've looked at, and anger management, anger-related issues. I had no idea was even, what these things were in my life that I was doing until I started reading into this stuff, and I realized, oh yeah, I've been doing that for years. That's how I cope. And, I've been letting people do this to me for years. And then, of course, my reaction to that is to leave, because I don't let anybody mistreat me anymore as an adult. So I leave and make sure that I leave the relationship before, without even stating my case or my cause, So people just think that I'm just, for whatever reason, maybe a little taking things over the top without realizing where I've been, where I'm coming from. And I have rights to assert myself when I need to make sure that my needs are being met. This stuff is very, very important. So if you haven't checked this article out, you can check that out on Irving Studios Child Abuse Survivor Monument, and it's called Containment and Boundaries. So really interesting stuff. And we can do a meditation quilt square information from Irving Studios as well. And this is the inner child stuff. So this is like, we can know that we are safe, right? We can know that we have survived. We're not a child anymore. We're victorious over all that was threatening to us, right? We can focus on an image or event that represents the present time, staying in the now, right? We can focus on a time that we felt particularly powerful. We can reflect on all those who stand by our side, right? And we can trust what we need for safety and strength that is available to us, right? So we can feel the presence of our inner strengths. Very, very important. So we have about a minute left. And I hope you have a really wonderful day. And thanks very much for joining me here. I appreciate it. And for everybody who's been tuning into my shows, spending this time with me, I really appreciate it. It's time that I really appreciate, because I know people are busy And for people to keep up with my shows and stuff, I really appreciate it. I hope they're helpful for you. And what I really hope is that you'll be good and kind to yourself today, and that you will reach out and get some help and not suffer alone. And that you'll reach out, and if you're really struggling and just can't cope, that you'll call a crisis line. Go call somebody and get some help. Right? Do not suffer on your own. And we'll see you tomorrow. Have a great day, everybody.